and welcome back to the Shoogly shed. I'm Ewan. Again, we're not in the shed today, we're in the garage working on the GS500. Our episode today is going to be covering the seat for the GS500. You saw in the previous episode where we made the seat pan, and now it's time to put some foam on it and to cover it and upholster it. Something I've been trying my hand at over the past few days. I actually bought some upholstery foam online to use for the seat, and it was advertised as extra firm. That's the kind of thing I think people use to stiffen up sofa cushions and things like that. Unfortunately, it was still too soft, despite it being extra firm for a motorbike seat. It wasn't the right kind of foam, it was just super soft. So if anyone wants a big chunk of really soft foam, let me know, I'm your man. So I was kind of deliberating what to do, whether I go online and try and find better foam or whether I had anything I could use instead. And then I remembered that I actually had two GS500 seats that were left over from the parts that I got for this bike. And so I have salvaged the foam from one of those seats and glued it to the seat pan. Now, obviously, it's not shaped yet. I've just glued it down to the seat pan, and I've put these offcuts on here as well, just because the seat naturally dips a little bit there. So I've built it up with these, and then when we trim it down and smooth it off, that should fill in that gap nicely. Aside from that, it's pretty much the perfect kind of size. I've also got a couple of offcuts here, although I'm not entirely sure I will need them. It's the kind of perfect size, it overlaps quite nicely, so I've got room to cut and to shape it nicely, and it is the exact kind of foam I want, nice and firm. So that's kind of worked out alright. The job today is to try and figure out a rough outline for the seat and to sort of shape it nicely to the bike and trim the edges and make it kind of the shape we want. And then I'm going to think about the cover for the top, which is a whole different kettle of fish. Now, if you're going to do any kind of seat foam shaping, this is the thing you want. It is an electric carving knife, circa 1985 I think. It was a wedding present to my parents that they never used, and I have used it in the past quite successfully to carve seat foam. I don't imagine they're terribly expensive if you want to go online and see if you can get one, but essentially it's just a reciprocating saw, but it's this blade here, like a carving knife basically, and the blades move back and forth over each other, if you can see like that. And it's really good and really like successful at cutting through foam, this kind of foam, so that's what we're going to use for this. The first thing I want to sort out is where the foam meets the tank. So I do want it to come up the tank a little bit, but not quite as much as that, maybe down to about here. And you can see it's sort of lifting here, so I need to take a bit of the bulk out of here to allow it to lie a bit more flat down, a bit more down like that. Sort of waist of the bike almost, where it comes in to meet the tank, and it joins up quite nicely there and there as well, and it sits really nice along the top of the tank there. It does still lift the foam up a tiny bit, but I'm going to glue it down a little bit more. I don't want to take too much off the front because I do want that nice join, and it also makes the seat lock into place nice and tight and there's no gap there. It's a pet peeve of mine, is bikes that have this horrible gap between that and the tank and the seat. Usually just from an ill-fitting universal seat or something like that, but you can, if you're making your own seat, don't create a gap there, make it nice and transitional between the seat and the tank. Okay, now we have a nice shaped seat here. It's the nice sort of square, just rounded edges that the seat pan was. I've kept it maybe about 3 mil overlapping the foam over the seat pan, so that when it gets upholstered and that foam gets just pulled around the edge of the seat pan to make it nice and sort of smooth around that edge. But pretty much quite happy with that shape. I think it looks good on the bike. Looks good to me, I think. So this bit under here, do you remember the recess for the quick release seat catch? So I've kind of had to sort of pack foam around it and things to make it sort of supported here. But again, you know, this will all get smoothed off, and when it gets covered you won't see any of that. So the next thing to do really is to decide on my kind of top profile here. I'm quite liking this front section, and the back section is about right as well. You can see where the dip was, so I just basically want to transition that into the front as smooth as possible without digging into this section or without having a lump here. So that's a better shape, I think. Follows the shape of the back of the bike nicely, and these bits in the middle, I kind of shaved them down quite a lot. They fill in that gap quite nicely, and it meets the tank really well. I'm also going to put a sheet of really thin foam, it's like sort of foam carpet underlay. It's a really thin sheet on top, just to ensure that there's a really smooth surface, so that when the upholstery gets stretched over it, there's no obvious lumps or bumps. Really smooths off the top of the seat, and that looks pretty nice to me, nice and smooth. I mean, I can't really avoid it any longer, but the next job is to do the upholstery, which is nowhere near as easy as that sounds. Okay, so the next step is to upholster the seat. I have been squirreling away in the background trying to learn how to use this thing behind me, the sewing machine. This is just a basic sewing machine. It's not an upholstery sewing machine, so it doesn't have a walking foot, which a lot of the professional machines do, and that makes feeding through thick material a lot easier. But this is just the kind of general type that you would use for household repairs and crafting, that kind of thing. However, you can get a decent result with these if you put in the practice and really actually get to know your machine and all the settings and that kind of thing. And that's basically what I've been trying to do over the past fortnight, is set myself little tasks and projects to try and do exactly that. Just learn how to use this machine and make sure I know exactly what all the settings do, so that when I come to do this seat, I will hopefully have a better chance of a good result. This is the material I'm using. It's a nice kind of suede. It's a sort of fake waterproof suede. Not that it'll be waterproof once it's full of stitches, but it's just a nice, wee bit different from the usual sort of black leather vinyl, that kind of idea. I am going to do a diamond stitch on this, and the way you get that sort of pillowing, the quilting, from that is that you sandwich your stitching with some foam. So the technical term is scrim foam. I'm actually using a foam that's meant for vinyl underlay. Anyway, basically when you stitch it, it gives a sort of pillowing effect. Otherwise you just have sort of flat stitches across the material. So that is the job of that. I've sandwiched the foam with some just generic sort of black cotton material underneath. The idea there is that the foam, because it's so kind of porous, the stitches can pull through it quite easily. So when you glue a layer of other material onto the underside, that gives the stitches something to bite into and pull tight. It's quite important that your thread tension is quite high on the machine, so that it really pulls those threads nice and tight and gives you that sort of billowing pillow effect. First job is to basically mark out the diamond stitching, and that takes a wee bit of time. Okay, so we've got the diamond stitch marked out. What I've done, and this is just sort of through trial and error with the bar stools, is I've made it quite a bit bigger than the actual seat's going to be. The seat is much smaller than that, but I've marked basically and started the diamond stitch down the middle. I'm going to stitch these like this. Although it's bigger, what it does is it allows me like a little bit of starting point to get the sewing machine up to speed. If I found that if I try and stitch straight from the get-go, the first couple of stitches maybe just aren't perfect. So I get to start a little bit off, sew these lines, and then I'll trim this up to size once I've done the diamond stitch, if that makes sense. So really the next thing to do is start stitching. I've loaded up with my orange thread, and yeah, I can't put this off any longer. I've just got to start stitching these lines, which might take a wee while, but we'll get there, we'll get there. Well, that was hard. The stool toppers that I've been sewing up until now, I've only really done maybe like that length, like 30 centimeters worth of stitching, but doing it across like these sort of horizontals here has been really tricky because you're feeding it in at such a strange angle and trying to avoid the rest of the material getting caught in this part of the machine, but also avoid anything hitting anything over here and keeping a straight line at the same time. Pretty mind-bending. Either way, I'm happy with that. As you saw, I unpicked some stitches. The quite good thing about this suede material is that you can actually unpick the stitches and it's not that obvious once you've stitched over them again. In fact, I don't think I could even find the ones I've unpicked if you told me to. So that's a good thing. It allows you just that little bit of margin for error. So now, after folding it in half and cutting it to ensure that it is symmetrical, we have our top piece. Happy with that. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a, you can see that, there's a bit of a crease down the centre from where I folded it, and it feels like it's in the foam. I'm hoping that will be less obvious when it's stretched over the seat, I hope. But you can maybe see it if you're looking closely. Aside from that, really chuffed with that. I think that looks pretty cool, happy with that. Next up is the band around the edge. I've cut a strip of fabric that's double the height of the seat essentially, just to give myself plenty to work with. I can always trim it, but I can't add any on. So we stitch this on to the edge of the top panel. The idea basically is to sew it like that around this edge, so that when you turn it inside out you get a nice clean seam. That's the idea. So I need to start, essentially I'm going to start from just where it meets the tank so that the seam is hidden. Sew round the seat like that to here again. Taken pretty much all day, but we're there. That's essentially the seat cover done. Diamond stitch top, and the last thing I did there was, I don't know if you can see it, which is a top stitch running along the side there, just for a little neatness. I did start to do it in orange thread, but number one, I was running out, and number two, with a contrasting thread like orange, it's really obvious if it's not perfectly straight, and frankly getting the length of this perfectly straight was proving too challenging. So I've used black thread, and I think it's actually quite nice, it's quite subtle, and it allows me a little bit of zigzagging. So all that's left to do now is put it on the seat. I've just jumped out to the shed for the last little piece of the puzzle, which is these corners don't like to stick terribly well. The glue's not quite strong enough to get the tension, so I'm going to stick a couple of rivets, one in each corner, just to keep the corners down. But aside from that, we're almost there. Well, there we have it. Our orange diamond stitch seat in position on the bike. What do you think? I'm pretty chuffed with that. Get a tripod out of the way. I'm pretty chuffed with that. For someone who is not an upholsterer, I think that looks great. I got that nice and snug up to the tank there. No gap. Really happy with that. And it clicks in and off really easily. So once the tank gets painted, that's pretty much the aesthetic. That's what it will look like. Oh, I'm so psyched about that. What an effort. Probably on par with the engine. Well, maybe not. Well, I hope you agree that the finished product looks pretty decent. And for someone that doesn't do upholstery or isn't an upholsterer, barely even ever used a sewing machine, that's a pretty good result, and I am thrilled to bits with it. Anyway, it's been a long episode. Thanks for sticking with me. As usual, give me a like, leave me a comment, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's really important, and I would appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.